All right, we're on Theo. Welcome everyone listening on the other end. This is another edition of Salmon Theory Talks. I'm Rob Streitinho. Have with me today Theo Wells IV. By the way, you have a fantastic name. I should say
Thanks.
that. Theo, I'm going to let you self introduce to folks listening or watching, but how would you describe your job to someone outside of your industry?
So first, I'll start off with the generic labels. Freelance creative strategist and what I consider a primal ethnographer. It's my job to, in essence, uncover stories and make unusual and unlikely associations.
Very nice. How do people respond when you say that?
They usually say, "Ooh, sounds interesting." I get that a lot. Um, I usually get just a more visceral, "What is that? What's going on?" And people start questioning and becoming very inquisitive. I get that a lot.
Yeah, nice. Well, Theo, I like asking personal questions in this forum, so I'm going to ask you a personal question. What should I know about your history to understand who you are today?
My father was a Black Panther, so I was raised with a lot of the mindsets, ideologies, and I would say the knowing of self. What that means is, in essence, is I get to define me and know who I am without letting the world dictate it.
Nice. Have you always felt that way, or like was there a turning point in your childhood that made you feel that way?
No, if anything, I would argue that it's probably gotten, I'll say for lack of better words, worse. Right? I think you get to know more of who you are, more of what you're not. As actually, I recently came across a interesting quote today from a comic book of all places. It was amazing. This was like 2 weeks ago, and it was often people try to change the system from within, but we tend to forget that when attempting that, it's more likely to change you,
Okay, interesting. Can you
and that's
elaborate on
very.
that?
But in essence, often if people say, I am of a race or a heritage or nationality, and I'm going to join politics to get more representation for who I am and people of my culture, and I'm going to change the system from within.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We also do it in corporate America some ways too, right? You join a position, you change it from within, and maybe I'll get this company to think differently and feel differently. But there's another aspect of that. The other aspect of that is you don't change it, it changes you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that just I find myself more within my own ideologies within that phrase.
Yeah. Do you find that the world of work has changed you?
Definitely. I find that it made me more aware of who I am and who I am not, what I can do, what I cannot do, what I'm willing to compromise on, what I'm willing to not compromise on. Um, it's funny. Usually, I met some people across my trajectory within corporate, and they would say things like, "Theo, like just play dumb, like just you don't have to be so, for lack of better words, combative." And I would say, I don't ask me to play dumb because I wouldn't ask you to play smart.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That sounds like a dig that only a select few people would understand.
And I love that about it. That's the
Is
point
that
of it.
is that where it comes from? Yeah, I love that. Um, okay, wonderful, man. You talked about things you won't compromise on. Let's go there for a second. What are the
Yeah.
things you don't compromise on these days?
Um, I don't compromise on the raw, honest opinion, meaning there's ways of delivering it, but I've often notated we have to accept the actual feeling, the actual emotion, the actual story. Um, I think quite often we might try to find a nice way to deliver it, but sometimes it's just raw.
Hmm.
I very recently had to. I don't know if I told you this. I very recently was part of the Elf boot camp. I mean Effie boot camp, and we presented to Elf, and I really had a hard moment in with the group where I said these ideas are all typical.
Hmm.
Excuse me. Everything we've generated. I mean, let's be honest. The concepts we're coming up with, these have been done a million times.
Hmm.
This is so typical. I'm pretty sure someone else will do it.
Hmm.
And literally, and another one of the teams did something similar, right? So the point was, the raw truth of it is, instead of us saying in a nicer way, well, we could be more original. Let's also accept this is typical.
Yes. And how do people respond to that?
Um, there's somewhat of a usually an abrasiveness at first, right? Because like they're taken aback and
Hmm.
they're hit. But I also think sometimes we need to be hit so we can learn how to reset and settle. It's just like a good boxing match,
Yeah,
right? The best fighters know how to take a punch because taking a punch is just as much of an art as it is to give one,
that's true.
right? Because you know how to be calm and focused and centered.
It's also something that it kind of shakes you out of your system, right? It's almost like you can go in with that and it feels like you're about to kind of, open me a new one, but then you explain what you mean and you can be gentle about. So what I mean is this, I think we
Mm,
can work, but it's like, but it shakes you out of your system for a little while, which sometimes it's easy for us to just go, oh, he's just saying that, and then kind of forget about it. I actually think that
mm,
oftentimes, I mean, there is that quote about the greatest myth in communication is the no the so the greatest myth in communication is the fact that it's taken place, or something to that effect. And I feel like
mm,
without having those sorts of sentences that kind of shake you in your foundations for a second, it's very easy for you to say, oh, we could be a bit more original. And I kind of, for all intents and purposes, I might not even notice that you said it, right? Because people are always
mm,
thinking about things in their own minds while others are talking and stuff. But when you say something like that, it's very, even the fact that it probably produced some awkward silence
mm.
forced everyone else who was distracted to go, hang on, what are we saying? Oh shit, okay, we're having an awkward moment now. That means that someone said something. What did they say? Oh, right. And now I'm listening.
And now
So
I'm
even
listening.
that's
Yeah.
powerful, right?
But because there's communication, but there's also the unspoken communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which flirts in the lines of the unspoken agreement. And sometimes the unspoken agreement has often cultural biases in it that says this space must be a pleasant space. This
Yes.
space must be an agreed upon space. When first we'd have to make sure that we are all agreement within that agreement. And I'm usually not in that agreement.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like, I mean, it probably varies by culture, but like I'm
Agreed.
in London and I feel like I come across as direct here, but I never came
Mm-hmm.
across as direct anywhere. It's just
Mm-hmm.
relative to how people in the UK talk about work. I come
It's
across as
different.
very direct.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting that it's all quite relative because I imagine maybe if I go to other environments, like I don't know, I've never worked in New York, but I imagine in New York I probably come across as very indirect. You know what I mean? Because
Possibly.
it's all
Yeah. Yeah.
relative. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think um, do you think that directness is something you kind of acquired over the years?
Yes, but I would argue that at a certain point, I didn't have time to bullshit. And when I
Mm-hmm.
say time, meaning if I'm not direct now, right, I put myself into an inadvertent, again, agreement
Mm.
of indirectness. I put myself up along this whole thought pattern of we won't say the thing that needs to get said. And eventually, the only thing that can break us out of that is saying the thing that needs to be said.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it feels like, I mean, eh, there's obviously a spectrum here where it's like there's probably people who would say, well, we all need to be about radical candor, which sometimes people may co-opt to basically be an asshole, but that's not what we're saying. All we're saying
No.
is sometimes if you're pressed for time, you just got to say the thing. And I do
Mm-hmm.
feel like sometimes people who waffle on it's not like they're pressed for time. I mean, you and I have talked about this in previous occasions, but I'm increasingly respectful of people who communicate as if their livelihood depended on it, because sometimes it does, i.e., we're both independently employed. And let's be honest, if we don't make our respective businesses of one work, then we don't work. And so that
Mm-hmm.
encourages you to be not curt, but like very to the point. And even the way you're answering is like, I have a clear sentence in my head I want to say, here it is, pause, you respond. And I feel like a lot of people would try and fill that silence
Mm-hmm.
because they always think they need to keep talking and talking and talking and talking. So what's your response to that? Like that need of almost, you need to, I mean, the way I describe it may or may not be right, but like we need to hunt for our food, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like oftentimes people who babble on, like I am now, don't need to hunt for their food. What's your response to that?
Um, I'll move it a different way outside of time. Let's move it to truth and art.
Yes.
An artist doesn't waste words, right? A musician doesn't waste a note,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's often they play between what notes to play, what notes not to play, right? So the way I see this, from the talking to the speaking to what I'm articulating, it's more to do with an art, right? It's more to do with, yes, I care about my time, yes, I care about yours, but in the way I'm putting something together, it plays into how I associate the world,
Mm.
right? And my attempt to navigate through it and get us both to a point in time or a point of thought, right? So, yes, I'm hunting, but I'm also, if I were a dancer, I am dancing the way that I dance
Mm-hmm.
and hearing the notes the way that I hear it versus moving my feet around because I'm jittery, or moving my
Mm-hmm.
feet around because I'm caffeinated, right? that wouldn't be art at that point to me,
Yeah.
right? It'd
Is
be
that,
more of an imbalance
yeah, because it wouldn't come from something you want to do, right?
or feel,
Or feel.
right?
Yeah.
If the dancer was just, if she goes from being like I love watching flamenco dances, right? Flamenco dance, there's such an art, such a craft, such a simplicity, and everything is so cultured. There's nothing really wasted. It's all a collective involvement. To me, conversation should be that, a collective
Yes.
involvement, right? If we get away from that, what the hell are we doing?
Yeah, and also you can't really do that without having active listening. So, for
Exactly.
example, to turn this into a bit of a meta conversation, but before we started recording, I asked, do you want to go through the script or do you want to free flow? And you
Hmm.
said, let's free flow. And part of me gets nervous when people say, let's free flow, because now
Mm.
there's an expectation that the flow should be just there. But that being said, the most meaningful conversations I tend to have follow that structure of free flow. We start
Hmm.
here and then we go like that. And if people are not listening, are not watching, I'm doing a lot of things with my finger. But like it just goes a bit all over the place, but it feels natural in how it goes all over the place. And
Mm.
it's made of segues and it's made of, oh, you said this. Can we go back to that? It's not just I have rehearsed some lines to some questions to
Hmm.
tell you, and you have rehearsed some answers to tell me. And it feels to me, I don't know if that's how your style of working as well, but I was talking to a mutual acquaintance of ours, James Sandrini, this morning.
Love James. I just spoke to him. Yeah.
Yeah, he says hi because I went to meet him for a meeting for something we're working on together that I think you and him have been talking about for a while. But essentially we both really recognize that our style is just to sit with someone and just ask questions and
Hmm.
just keep asking questions, and then eventually opportunities emerge rather than go in with like such a strict agenda that there is no room for humanity, because it is
Hmm.
possible if I show up just with an agenda, I'm not giving you anything of me. I'm just showing up with that agenda. So it feels like you don't really respond to that. You respond to bring your whole humanity, and then let's work within that.
Yeah, I would think I extract it,
Mm.
right? I think like you said an interesting point. You said earlier, it feels like if we go free flow, that there's like an expectation. And in the ways that I work, I look to attack something simple like that. Because if we make things, let's say, more meta, a little more esoteric, how tall does a tree expect to grow,
Mm-hmm.
right? How far does a stream of water expect to flow? Like there's, if we remove the idea of an expectation, all we can do is flow. And I think that in our industry, it's one thing to have an objective, right? It's another thing to have an expectation, because the
Mm-hmm.
expectation is almost a personal affiliation with self and what you expect to get out of this, versus an objective. Here's what you intend to see.
Yes.
But we have to be open to seeing everything else because that is the world,
Yeah, that's
right? That's
interesting.
the fascination.
Yeah, I like your distinction between objective and expectation, because if you put it into the realm of strategy, it's like, well, there is an objective for this ad or this business or whatever, but how you get there, who knows, right?
Yeah.
And what happens until you get there, who knows? Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's funny. I mean, you and I are part of the Salmon crew group that I run on WhatsApp, but someone was mentioning what are good books on objective setting, and I said How Not to Plan by Les Binet and Sarah Carter.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I took from that book, which I subscribe to massively now, is be very rigorous on objectives and measurements and then embrace chaos everywhere else. And I really like that. It's like if you know what you're solving for, how you solve it, it's going to be, frankly,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's a shit show because creativity is not predictable, right?
Of
It's
course.
going to
Yeah.
go, it's going to go into rabbit holes and dead ends and whatnot, and that's just part of it. But yeah, it's I like that definition of objectives versus
There's
expectation.
a famous quote by, it's either, I believe it's Miles Davis, but it could be Charlie Parker.
Mm.
He said, after you've done all the practice, after you've learned all the notes and keys and scales, after you've done the best you can do, just shut the fuck up and play. And I thought it was the most beautiful way to bring things back to the artist in all of us.
Yes.
Yeah.
It also feels like practical advice for people in strategy because I don't know if you've ever witnessed this, but I've seen it and I have practiced it myself. We preamble our work so much instead of just showing it. We go,
Mm-hmm.
we're very excited to work on this brief, and oh, just so you know, here's three caveats about what you're about to see. It's like just tell me the fucking story,
Hmm.
or just show me the idea, or just tell me what you think the problem is and how you'd solve it. Um, but yeah, like, I don't know. Why do you think we do that? Why do you think we don't just play?
I came from marketing before being in advertising. And marketing was very numbers, benchmarks, measurements. What are we going to hit? We're not going to hit. And
Mm.
I believe once getting into advertising, strategists in a way flirt that line of being strategists, but also speaking the language of marketing. Now, strategists have to be in a way dangerous because we have to know the audience so well that we speak languages. We speak languages to directors, we speak languages to VP, we speak the language of the CMO, we speak the language of a partner, we speak the language to shareholders, right? And it's different tiers of language.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if you lose balance or grip of all, you begin to just conflate and merge all the languages into one, right? And I think we're usually taught and trained to set up the expectation of what is to be seen and to also put everyone else at ease,
Mm.
right? These caveats, these objectives, these measurements, we putting everyone at ease. Trust me, it's almost like no matter what happens, we got this worked out, right? But I
Yeah.
also think it limits the space to say we too are chaotic and this is what chaos looks like. It
Mm.
was interesting. I never pictured before getting into advertising strategists would be so reserved,
Mm.
to be so close to creatives and yet so reserved. It's interesting,
It
right?
is.
Because if we are the sails on like a medieval boat, right? Even those sails usually end up with holes in them. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a part of the chaos you have to embrace. And to be honest, from my background, I'm more closer to the chaos and getting more comfortable with the caveats.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it makes you wonder why that is, because you're right. Strategists in say in creative agencies should be, I mean, in a way, they're expected oftentimes to be more radical, but at the same
Yeah,
time, it's like if you're too radical and too opinionated and too creative, now it feels like you're trying to do the creative's job, and that becomes a problem. So I
sure.
wonder if that's why people go, well, I have strong views, but also, what do you want to do? And which, by the way, it's fine, right? You can
Mm,
have strong views and then change your mind all the time. I would say I probably subscribe to that. Like I'll say, well, maybe it's this, and people go, no, that's wrong because of this, and I go, oh yeah, you're right, and then you go back. But yeah, a bit of personality. And again, it might be just a different regional context, but I would say there's a type of strategy that is done in the UK that I would define as maybe a bit too book smart for its good, for its own good.
mm,
Whereas I subscribe more to where I think you and I might come from, which is what I would call street smart, which is just we may not be the most academically accomplished, although I do know you've done, you've done more training than I have, trust me. But we know the basics well enough to just talk about them without needing to go, I've read the book about X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, it's just, it becomes more instinctive, more organic the way we talk
mm.
about it, rather than being like, I can quote from memory three-quarters of a
Yeah,
book.
yeah.
At least that's not my style. I don't know if it is yours.
I think there's Jay Z in creating Picasso Baby, right? Jay Z was inspired to bring in different artists into a venue, and it was the first time anyone has shot a rap video inside of an art gallery. And
Really?
his intention in doing that was to bring together different artists from different spectrums to say we're cousins, and
Mm,
essentially art triggers art. So, in my opinion, when it comes to us dealing with creatives, if we're seen more like a partner,
mm-hmm.
right, who also triggers art, I think we become more useful because if we don't do that, we arguably become the data person,
Yes.
right? And it's the data person that becomes when you meet better great creative directors, the data person becomes a caveat for the CMOs like comfort,
Yes.
versus the person who contributed to the inspiration of the idea.
Yeah. Or they become an order taker because they might
Yep.
go, hey, help me justify this idea that
Yep.
I had. Find me a data
Mm,
point for X, Y, and Z.
yep.
It's funny, I just finished reading a book which I would say is a solid 3.5 out of 5. I probably was expecting a bit
Mm-hmm.
more in sections, but it's a book about consulting. It's the consultant survival guide, which every consultant I know talks about. And I was like,
uh,
you know what? I'm just gonna buy it and see what the hell's going on. And look, there are interesting bits there, but one of the things that he says is that you want to be on the decision making side, not the order taking side. And
yep.
so if you apply that to relationship between strategists and creatives, if you are in a position where you and your creative director can jointly discuss as peers what's the right course of action, you're on the decision making side. But if they're
Mm,
just going, hey, here's my idea, by the way, can you help me prove it? And I would argue you're more on the order taking side, which
yeah.
is the least, it's the most commoditized and the least profitable
Mm.
side, by the way. Um, Theo, I'm going to pivot to something else because I wanted to talk to you
Sure.
about this for a while. Um,
Mm,
First time you and I spoke, you had a very interesting point of view on imposter syndrome. By the way,
yes.
caveat, because I know people get opinionated about this. I fully subscribe to the idea that imposter syndrome isn't really like academically proven, but that fear of feeling like you're not good enough, you have a very counterintuitive view on that. Can you share that
Mm.
with us?
Yeah, I think imposter syndrome to me is a bit of a luxury.
Mm-hmm.
I think to be more blunt, and I'll choose to purposely be blunt on this. Um, I believe we are in such a self-absorbed society that we could approach a concept and think, well, I don't know if I can do this, even if you've done the goddamn thing a million times, right? And at a certain point, when do you stop making it about you? And I think that is such it's overtaking so much of our industry. And don't be wrong, there's a space for that to say, there's this thing that I create and or do, and my God, it worked a little bit. I don't know if I could do it again, right? So
Mm-hmm.
now you fall into this realm of doubt. But imposter syndrome to me, it becomes like this rabbit hole of self that we begin to fall down in such a repetitive way where you could also argue, how do you have the time to keep doing this? Like, how do you have the time and or bandwidth to keep doubting yourself so much? What if, right? What if you connected your identity of self to something else more than this one project you're working on, or the people who you are presenting to? Because let's be honest, they're all people and nothing in this is life or death.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. Right. So I think that imposter syndrome becomes this. I mean, I think we overinflate many terms in this industry. And I think
Mm-hmm.
imposter syndrome is now one of them. And all of a sudden now everyone feels this. And oh my God, you felt it, I felt it too. And now we're having like powwow groups about we've all felt like we haven't been good enough in things. And it's like, okay, when do we stop? Like when do we stop the wheel from spinning? If this is a train, when do we hop off?
Yeah.
Right? Because the train continuously stops and you're just not getting off. So my question is then, how do you have so much time to stay on this ride?
Yeah. What do you think? So, if someone says, "Well, but I do have a lot of doubt about myself," what's your
Mhm.
response to that? Because
Then you don't know
the
yourself.
go on.
Like the hell with fear. Okay.
Mm,
There's a saying, but when you grow up in a Black Panther family, um, there's a saying, or there's a practice that you go through with the boys and the
mm,
girls. Um, and it was like I told my dad when I was a kid, I was 8 years old. He was like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "The president of the United States." He was like, "No, you're not. You're a criminal. They're always going to see you as a criminal. We want to be when you grow up." I said, "The president of the United States." He says, "No, you don't. Nothing but a criminal. You're a filthy criminal. What do you want to be when you grow up?" I said, "The president of the United States." He says, "Nope. You're never going to be that. You're going to be a criminal. What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "A criminal?" And then my father says, "Son, don't ever let me tell you who you are, what you want to be. Now, what do you want to be when you grow up?" The president of the United States.
that's nice.
What I'm saying is there's a certain point of if you no longer know who you are or what you can do or what you can create, and you keep getting lost in the can I, would I, will I, should I, why don't I, you made it all about you.
Mm, yeah.
Like there's a beauty to craft, right? Practice is
Mm,
craft. And then it becomes about the play,
yeah.
right? And not about you.
Yeah. And about helping others do things, right? So going
Yes.
back to our craft, like it's in some sense, I like that my job is not what I would classify a kind of a front end creative job. What do I mean by that? Yes, of course, I show up to present the work with creatives, but I didn't write it. I'm just in the
Mhm.
background making sure that nothing's falling through the cracks in regards to our understanding of the audience is sound, our understanding of
Mhm.
the brand is sound, our understanding of the marketplace is sound. It's like you're the exec producer minus the money you've put into the project.
Mhm.
But it's like you're in
Mhm.
the background. You're not Jared Leto or whoever showing up on camera. You're just in the background making sure that the thing can run as well as it can. And I quite like that. In some sense, I don't want to have the pressure of needing to be all that. I find that strategists that try and create that pressure of I need to solve everything. I'm like, no, you don't.
Mhm.
That's not your
Yeah.
job. Your job is not to
Yeah.
solve everything. Your job is to help people solve things. There's a big
Yeah.
difference. Even if you're a solo, you're still there to orchestrate, not to control. Which there's a difference. And there's also something that obviously it's I need to be careful when I say this because it's not really my background, but what I've read about it and speaking to people about it, I think the feeling of being an imposter, to your
Mm-hmm.
point, being a luxury, it's also the luxury of someone who can afford to sit
Can afford
down
that. Yeah.
and to spend so much time thinking about it. Whereas sometimes if your survival depends on you just getting on and doing it anyway, right? Because fear is fear. We all feel
Yeah.
fear. It's doing stuff despite it, right? And when you have no other choice but to do stuff despite the fear, that's when you start maybe getting more to the side of what you're saying, which is I was so overindulgent with some of my feelings back then. Now, of course, you should entertain those feelings and honor them for what they are. But there's a difference between honoring them and going, okay, I feel this, I'm going to do it anyway, and I'm going to manage it as I go, versus, oh, poor me. I'm just going to sit here and isn't the world unfair?
So I think there is an unspoken poor me, right? So for instance, let's say like we'll bring this to our relationship with fear, because
Mm-hmm.
fear is fear, but what is our relationship to it, right? So let's say you and I just met, and I spent like an hour just talking about my feelings. I feel this, I feel that, I feel scared, I feel happy, I feel low, I feel mid, I feel this, I feel that. At a certain point, right, I've oversaturated you with how I feel,
Mm-hmm.
right? In the relationship of that discussion, it'd be fair of you to say, in talking to Theo, sometimes I just feel a little exhausted or overwhelmed, right? Because in ways I have to end this conversation, or I choose to end this conversation, harbor these emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these are emotions that he is just giving upon me, right? And spewing. Though I think Theo's a great guy, I don't really want to be around all that emotion. And
Yes.
that's fair to say, because you could take that in regard to any relationship that you have. No one wishes to take on this massive Titanic of your emotional state
Mm-hmm.
that you haven't self-regulated, right?
Yeah.
One thing I grew very comfortable with as I began to matriculate in my career, and this will sound harsh, but it was, Theo, whatever you're going through, no one cares, bro. Like it was a hard conversation, but it was real. No
Mm-hmm.
one cares. And here's ways to flip it. Because if you express it, no one's really going to care. And then if you do express it, who actually follows up to say, how are you? No
Yeah.
one. So the
Yeah.
reality is, no one cares. Right? So
Yeah.
I can care, and it's valid for me to care because I'm a human,
Yeah.
but it's not valid for me to allow myself to sit in stasis of my own emotional state.
Yes.
No one cares about it that much, including me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And especially after a certain point, it becomes counterproductive, right? And again, I should say, like, I've probably spent way more than 70% of my life not honoring any of the feelings I had. And then I started getting more
Yeah,
comfortable with them. But I honored them in order to move past them.
you have to.
Not, so give you
Yeah.
an example, a personal example. I lost my mother 4 months ago,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a completely sudden episode, and obviously I'm still grieving, but I honor that feeling in order to feel like I can slowly, very slowly
Yeah.
move on from it. What I don't do is just repress it so much that now I spend 4 months going, oh my god, poor me, I lost my mom. Of course I feel sorry for the situation. Of course I feel sorry for all the time. I wish I'd spend more with her. But the reality is, like, I do meditation on occasion, because that's the
Mm-hmm.
one time where I feel like my emotions really come to the fore, and I have like the right playlist to put me in the state, etc. And I cry. But I cry in order to go, okay, that needed to come out, and now I can move
Yeah.
on with the rest of
Yeah.
my day. It's like a controlled valve release
Mm-hmm.
rather than keep it all in or blow it all out all at the same
Yes.
time,
Yes.
like none of
Yeah.
those is going to end well. But the slow release, at least for me, it works. So that's at least how I relate to it.
Well, I'm
um,
happy you brought up grief, because I think grief is one of the most potent emotions there is, right?
mm,
And it's so potent that it begins to take control of the moment. And grief is like knocking on the door, like, hey, I'm coming out whether you're busy or not,
yeah.
right? And it could be so raw that you have to just take a second to be with it, right? But now imagine what it looked like if you cried every single day for the next 12 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's a space for you to even tell yourself, I have to get over this,
Yes.
right? I have to move forward. And I think anything in balance is prosperous. Anything out of balance, right, is just not conducive. And I think the
Absolutely.
idea of imposter syndrome, especially if you have the collective group think around it, where I have it, you have it. It's almost like Oprah in reverse. Like you get imposter syndrome, you get imposter syndrome. Like when do we stop it to say, all right, I got it, I feel scared, move. Because we have to move.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's it.
Yeah, I think your point on if you feel something so much that it forces you to basically not do anything, that's when it's a bit of a red flag, right?
Yeah.
Because again, like and when you work independently, you end up signing up for things that you go, oh, do I really know how to do this? But
Yeah.
you, but now you said you're going to do it, so you're going to find a way.
So you're gonna find a way to
You're
do
going
it
to
and
find a
figure it
way.
out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Even if it's like, it's just funny, like when I started doing meditation, not that I'm like super diligent about it. I do it when I have to do it, but I know how to do it, and I know how to sit still for like 20 minutes and not really, I know the
Yeah.
techniques and stuff. But and I'm not afraid of what emerges, which I think is the big barrier that a lot of people have when it comes to meditation. They go, "Oh my God, what am I going to think?" And I go, "What you really feel. It's great."
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
where was I going with this? Oh shit, I now
Meditation sitting
forget.
with the feelings.
Same with
Meditation sitting with
feelings.
the feelings is 20 minutes
20
being
minutes.
still.
Yeah. Oh God, I now forget. This is what happens as well. My mind just goes places. How's that for free flowing? Maybe that's
It
a
went
good
to a
sign.
good place. You started smiling and shit. That's perfect. You
Yeah, yeah,
know?
exactly. Something happened in here that I now forget. But yeah, I definitely think there's kind of merit. Oh, I know where I was going. One of the visualization techniques that I have sometimes in meditation, especially if I'm trying to untangle what I'm feeling, is I think of it as basically like my own version of Alcoholics Anonymous, not because of the
Mm,
alcohol, but because of the group setting. So
mm,
essentially, I'm visualizing myself sitting down with all possible permutations of what I might be feeling that then and there, and they're all separate to me. And I ask them questions. I go, right, you, what's your fucking problem right now? Oh, it's the, okay, cool, gotcha. You, why are you here today? And I'm basically like gathering these different sides of me. And what I'm getting at is that one part of me might go, oh man, I really want to make this thing work, or I really want to not. And the other go, okay, now let's listen to you, but I'm really scared. I go, great, you two can coexist. Okay? You're not
mm.
negating each other's reality. You two can coexist. And it took me fucking ages to be okay with that idea that I can be frightened and still feel extremely ambitious about something and driven to do it.
I'm curious. If you could do something that you think is batshit crazy and it could have your name on it forever to say he did this, what would that thing be?
Oh God. Um, I'd never see myself as a batshit crazy person, but
Mm.
I think one day I'd like to write children's books. It's
That's
probably not,
batshit crazy to you? Okay.
I'm not a batshit crazy person. It's that I'm not a batshit crazy person. I mean, what do you want me to
Fair
say?
enough.
Build a giant statue of me in the middle of Portugal? I don't think so.
Hilarious. Oh, I love that.
What about you?
That'd be a Oh, I've often told people I want my honeymoon to be on the moon. And
Interesting.
I'm often pissed off that people can't afford it and haven't even thought about it yet. Like it's just. I actually once had to ask. She actually looked up. She was like, "Oh my god, the seats are 10 million. Yes, $10 million a seat." And I was like, "All right, some people make 10 million in a week. Like
That's
it's not so
interesting.
far outside of the scale. I just to me like I believe hardcore in the world is your oyster. And as
Mm,
someone who eats oysters a lot and has shucked them a lot and even worked at an oyster bar for a little while, there's a
nice.
beauty in the collective, in the individualistic expansion of self, in both what I would consider your light and your shadow. And you get to be insane
Mm,
because the world's a little mad,
it
right? Like
is.
like you get to be the unique expression that you are in every capacity of your expression because it is your expression.
Mm,
And I think it's like I love how you said I'm not a batshit crazy person. Fair enough, right? Like
yeah.
you, I don't know if what a turtle shit crazy person looks like, but you might be that person, right?
Yeah.
We get to expand as we expand, and I think that is the significance and the uniqueness of life. If we live in a space though where we're being dictated as far as how far we can expand or even contract, I think that we might be in the wrong space.
Yeah. Yeah, because then you're entering comparison mode, right? Because immediately when you asked me this and I said, and you said that's Batshit, in my mind for a nanosecond I was like, oh my god, I'm not interesting enough for Theo. But that's not what your response was about. It was just okay, so that's your version of the answer. My version is I want to do a honeymoon on the moon,
Yeah,
and I go, okay, that's interesting. I never thought about it that way. Um, I mean, the clue is in the name, right? The honeymoon. So anyway,
that's where I
but
got it
yeah,
from.
yeah. I know you got to go in a few minutes. I'm just going to finish on a couple of quick fire
Sure.
rounds, if that's okay. So, firstly, is there a quote or a lyric that sums up how you feel about your life so far?
No, but I can give you one that helped me to define my life.
Tell me.
Um, it's by Luther Ingram. If loving you is wrong, I don't want to be right. He said, it's two things. It was two lines. He said, "Are you wrong for giving your love to a married man? And am I wrong for trying to hold on to the best thing I ever had?" It was one of the first lines I ever heard that put me in complete contrast with myself. And I was like, wait a minute, is he wrong? And then he showed his complete dedication when he says, "Your friends tell you there's no future in loving a married man. If I can't see you when I want, I'll see you when I can't." And I was like, oh, how defined. That's powerful.
It's powerful.
And for me, it's lines like that that shift the thinking and shift things more towards, well, what do you really want in this world? What is a burning desire? It's what I call devilish truth.
Mm.
What is the thing that you want in spite of everything else?
Yes.
That's
Well,
profound to me.
that is profound. That actually segues to my next question. What would you like to be
Mhm.
remembered for?
One, fucking things up, whatever that is, fucking shit up entirely. Um, Two, making making the world question itself.
Nice. Who in
Yeah,
your industry deserves more attention?
good question. I don't know if it's in my industry, but I jumped to psychology. Sadia Khan.
Hmm.
Sadia Khan has amazing intellectual thoughts and makes us again question ourselves and even incorporate tradition. In our industry directly, I even say John Steele.
Back to the classics.
Back to the classics, because I think there's a certain level of attentiveness and genius and questioning that we've lost. And I think we've replaced deeper questioning with fast fashion insights.
Yes.
And what the hell will that do for anyone?
Yeah.
Um, I think I've spoken to John many a times, and John, he never ceases to even make me question how far am I thinking, or how deep.
Mm.
Last time I spoke to John, true story. The last two, I'll make it two quick points. The second to last time I spoke to John, John had like some book of like Thailand, and like some table behind him. I was like, John, what the hell are you doing with that thick ass book? He's, oh, I just got done reading it. I'm going to live in Thailand for a month next month. So I was like, what? Right? The time after that, I spoke to John. I'm like, John, where the hell are you? Oh, I'm actually in Antarctica. I've always wanted to go to Antarctica. Like, he's that curious.
Yes.
And I mean, still, I would argue I can't keep up with John. Like, I literally have no reference to what he'll do next. And yet, he's so inquisitive into the world that I feel like we've lost that art and that skill. If I had to make it modern time, modern day and age, I would go to shit. I had it, then my brain said no, maybe there's someone else. Oh, Kevin Brockenberg. Kevin
Okay.
Brockenberg was actually a group strategy director, part of VML. I think this industry right now is doing this very interesting turn within ageism, and it's casting out the old guard without properly vetting the new guard,
Mm.
right? Or properly teaching and instructing the new guard. Now, someone who's has the thinking of old, but I'm more so part of the new, I see that there's something lost in the art of even how things are crafted and attended to. Um, I think there's a lot that I have to learn from these spaces, and I learn more every
Nice.
time I speak to them.
That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
And that's
Oh,
very
Derek
true.
Walker. I got to add Derek Walker in there. He's not within strategy, but as a copywriter, Derek shakes things up, and I
Oh,
think we need to shake it
he's
up.
always dropping truth bombs on my LinkedIn. It's quite
Yeah,
insane,
yeah.
and
He
I
shakes
love
the entire industry. Love it.
he does. Hope one day I get to talk to him on this forum. I think he'd be up for it.
Oh,
We'll see.
oh, it'll be the best forum you ever had. Trust me, it'll be the best one.
Last question. What's one thing you wish I had asked you?
I think you already asked me. You asked me how's my day.
Very good. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's the best
And
question.
do you have a question for me?
I mean, I asked one. The second one is, what are you so afraid of?
Being ignored. That's my greatest fear.
Mm,
I could
mm.
theoretically relax more often, but I'm afraid people will forget me and ignore me if I'm not always on their faces.
A top of mind. Very industry life. Very industry related.
Yes, very,
Mm.
also very. I wish certain emotional needs were met when I was 5. I've
Of
done my
course.
work on psychotherapy. No, but that's it. I'm afraid of if I slow down, I get forgotten and left behind. So
Mm.
I'm trying to not to slow down more often. Theo, I know you got to go. Thank you so much. Where can people learn more about you?
LinkedIn. Find me, Theophilus Wells IV. I have some new exciting announcements coming up in the next few weeks, but for now, LinkedIn.
Fuck yeah. Thanks very much, man. And thanks everybody for listening. Theo, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you. You as well.